new Star Wars short series, Tales of the Jedi, has dropped on Disney+. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 6 episodes from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all 6 episodes of Tales of the Jedi. Now, this will be a spoiler discussion, so if you haven't watched Tales of the Jedi yet, go watch it, come back, share your ranking, and then watch my ranking, and let's get started. In last place, Practice Makes Perfect, episode 5. And in this episode, Ahsoka is training with the droid bot things, the one that Luke trained with in the Millennium Falcon in A New Hope. And Anakin's like, this isn't good enough. And so he takes her to have a bunch of clone troopers shoot her and knock her out a bunch of times until she gets better and better at it, realizes it's more effective if she fights with 2 lightsabers, and she gets really, really good at it. And then it has this final little twist on there where it reveals right before a big key moment in the series finale of Clone Wars that Rex turns to and goes, well, it looks hopefully all that practice will pay off. And it's a nice little zinger to close out the episode. So for me, this is the one that felt the least interesting because it just feels like deleted scenes from the Clone Wars with a nice little hook at the end. Like you see this little sequence where they're training and pushing her harder and harder and harder. And then it's like, oh, yeah. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Was she able to do all that stuff in the series finale? She'd been training and Anakin of all people was the one that pushed to make that happen. And Rex. Okay. Yeah. That's how it happened. If you kind of remove the little hook at the end, besides that, it's just like we're watching Ahsoka train, which is what she was doing all throughout the Clone Wars. Is it that there's not any novelty to it? It's just kind of more of a thing that we've already gotten quite a bit of. And when these other stories are showing us a lot of just unique things that we haven't seen, it's not as interesting to me. So besides the little hook at the end that made me go, wife, kids, do you know what that was? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm pretty sure it's from the finale of Clone Wars. Let me show you. And they're like, no, you're wrong. I wasn't wrong. I was right. In 5th place, episode 1, Life and Death. The episode about Ahsoka being born and her mother taking her out on a hunting trip. She gets kidnapped and then uses her force powers on a creature, and the creature brings her home, and they realize she's a Jedi and she's special and called to this higher purpose. It was an interesting little glimpse into how different cultures discover that their children are Jedi Force users and get pulled into that world. And so I just kind of appreciated that little glimpse. It's a little bit dull. Of the episodes, it's probably the one that kind of dragged the most for me, even at just 15 minutes, because you are kind of dealing with a character that's being introduced, but they're not really the important character. It's the baby. And so just kind of on a hunting trip, maybe gets, okay, cool, interesting enough. And, just kind of seeing the way, even a child can interact with an animal using the Force. Okay, that's kind of neat, kind of interesting. But, of the episodes, it was kind of like, okay, cool. As a bit of a dull start to the series. Like when this was the first one, I was like, that's kind of interesting. I hope they pick up a little bit, and they really did. In 4th place, episode 2, Justice. And I really enjoy all the rest of these. They're actually quite difficult for me to rank because I just really dug what they did with the rest of them. And here you have Count Dooku, I guess not Count Dooku quite yet, and a young Qui-Gon going on a mission. And they're off to save a senator's son who has been kidnapped. And very quickly you realize that the town that they're going to is not friendly towards them. They don't view them as the heroes or the saviors. They're all in on the plot to kidnap this senator's son. And then the senator's son who's been kidnapped, he's more sympathetic towards his kidnappers than to his father. Like, he sees what's going on and he's like, I mean, I don't want to be kidnapped, but how could my father let all this happen? And very quickly you can see Dooku, he is not on Team Senator. It's like, the Senator didn't send me. He doesn't even know we're here. And you just see his mind change. And it leads to a scenario where there's literally like a showdown between the Senator and his troops and these Jedi that are trying to save the town. And you just start to see this other side to what was going on with the Jedi right around the prequel era. Why on earth could the great Jedi collapse? Why would they miss the rise of a Sith? And why did a civil war break out if things were so great? Things were far from great. And just these glimpses start to inform things, I think, much better of what was going on. Little glimpses like this, where a senator's obviously so corrupt, and the people don't trust the Jedi anymore to do the right thing. And as we move into some other ones, it really gets into that plot point. And I just loved that so quickly you realize, how does a Jedi turn into a Sith? And we saw it with Anakin, but that Anakin had his own issues and stuff. So how does someone that didn't have Anakin's really specific issues, what if it's someone that what drove them to the Sith was actually the same thing that drove them to be a Jedi? They want to serve the people, and they realize the Jedi are serving the Senate, not the people. In third place, episode 6, Resolve. And I thought this was just a nice little Clone Wars prequels epilogue for Ahsoka Tano, where you see the funeral of Padme that we've seen glimpses of, before, but then you pick up on some of these characters that weren't in that narrative in Revenge of the Sith. And you start following Ahsoka afterwards, and you see Bail spots her, and he's like, knows that she's on the good, you shouldn't be here. And there's just enough communication between them that, like, she's trying to get out of the war. She's done fighting, and he thinks she still has something to offer, and does something to, create just a little bit of a path for them to reconnect in the future. And then you just get this little tale about a community and imperial oppression, to where Ahsoka saves someone but has to expose herself as a Force user, and some fool decides this is his opportunity to benefit from all of this, is to turn her in. So I'll get the reward from the Empire if I turn her into the oppressors. And instead of it playing out the way he thinks, turns out these Inquisitors are kind of awful people, and everything gets destroyed because of this. Their whole livelihood, everything is burned to the ground because this guy betrayed them. Really betrayed her for his own benefit, hopefully, at least in his own mind, and it just goes horribly wrong. And Ahsoka has to use her skill set. You realize just how powerful she is as a fighter, easily takes out our Inquisitor person. And you also see that the compassion in her, that she doesn't get revenge on the person that wronged her. In fact, she stops the person that wronged her, betrayed her, caused all this pain, stops that person from being killed by the Inquisitor. And I think there's an opportunity here for a better fight, a longer fight at that. I don't know why. I know you want to make her powerful, but make her so powerful that the image is not a threat, but it's not as compelling as if there is a little bit of a back and forth there. And so then you get to the end of it, and she uses that communicator to tie back in. Bail's going to help them out, but also there's just this little, it's indirectly stated. She doesn't say, I want back in. He says, are you sure? It's more dangerous than ever. And she just nods. You realize this is the path by which she gets back involved and shows up in Rebels. There's little ties to the other things. So I just love kind of like where the episode is placed with the prologue to it, the main stuff of, you just kind of fills in those gaps of what was her response to this? How did she respond to this? And how did she get back? And you get to see those glimpses. Our runner-up, episode 3, Choices. Another Count Dooku mission episode. This time he's out with Mace Windu, and a Jedi has been killed, and they're trying to figure out what happened. Dooku wants to investigate. He wants to, do the right thing. Mace Windu's like, we don't have authority to investigate. We have to do what the council says. And so let's play by the rules. They get there very clearly. Something's up. Something's not quite right with everything going on. And Dooku eventually, when they get in the middle of everything, figure like, wait a minute. These guards, they weren't killed by an outside person. They were shot by these dudes. So he calls it out, and he's like, gets ready to go to war. And is revealed the senator was the one that was responsible for all of this. And Dooku just picks a fight. Senator gets killed. Dooku takes everybody out except one guy that basically says the senator was so corrupt that we would do anything to try and get some leverage over him to get him to stop with the oppression and get him to actually serve us. And so we ended up having to kill the Jedi. We had to do all this stuff. And that was our plan. We just don't want this corrupt guy leading us anymore. And you see Mace Windu is the guy that ends up on the council that's a part of the Jedi Council that totally missed the rise of a Sith, a couple of them. And you notice like he's thinking about the rules and he's missing the people. His focus is entirely in the wrong spot. And even as they go back, you learn that Mace Windu gets a seat on the council because he followed the rules. And Dooku, instead of following the rules, went into action and got a senator killed. And there's a side to it where you go like, yeah, Dooku was impulsive and he did things in a way that he probably shouldn't. And then there's this other side to it of like, but you're missing the big picture. You are so focused in on the leaves that you're missing the tree, which is the people are so fed up with what's going on. They don't trust the Jedi to do the right thing. Mace Windu's like, why didn't you just talk to her? She would have helped you out. And they're like, what? You guys are the puppets of the Senate. You would have helped him. And then in the aftermath of all of this, Mace Windu is promoted because Dooku got the senator killed. The council's thinking about the senator, not about the people, and not about the corruption and not weeding out evil. And you can just see that like the thinking is wrong. And like, why did a civil war break out? Why would half of the Republic side with the separatists? Why would they want to be separatists? Oh, the Senate was really not good. And there's a bunch of like things where the fall of the Senate was like a kind of as a signal of the end of a good thing in A New Hope when you phrase it the way it was. But you also think like, why did things fall apart? Because it was a corrupt Senate, corrupt politicians leading it. Oh, it's all of that. I think just makes the prequel so much better. The world of Star Wars make more sense. And Dooku have a more compelling arc in all of this. But in first place, episode 4, The Sith Lord, and I just thoroughly enjoyed the way this episode worked, where it's set at the beginning during Phantom Menace. And you see what Dooku was doing during Phantom Menace, what he was up to, what he was paying attention to. And then you see his response afterwards, and you get to see his final interaction with Qui-Gon Jinn. And he's not happy that Qui-Gon died and goes to confront Palpatine. And you can still seem very conflicted as like, I betrayed so much of what I believe in, but the Senate, the council, they're just not listening. And he talks to one of his friends that was on the council about all this, like his concerns, and she actually listens. She follows him because she senses something's afoot and realizes he's in with a Sith, confronts him about it, and they have a little moment in the middle of it where before things get really, really, really bad, she says, I believe you. You're right. I stepped down from the council. You're right. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They need to change. She says all of that. But he's blinded by the dark side and the rage. He goes, you and your council or something like that. And so in his desire for a good thing, in corruption, he turns to something worse that leads to something devastating, far more oppressive, far more corrupt. And it makes Dooku a much more compelling character when you really fill in these gaps of why did he go and partner with the Sith Lord? He bought into the lies. He had a good motivation, but he chose a wrong path and he bought lies. That's Palpatine lied to Anakin. He lied to Dooku to pull them into his little world so that he could rise to power. And just you get to see really the moment where Dooku shifts in the same way that there's a scene in Revenge of the Sith where you see Anakin shift to full blown the other side. He's conflicted. He's being manipulated. He's making some bad choices, and he shifts to the other side. He's all in, and you get that moment with its own confrontation here. And I think this one's better than Anakin's, but that's a story for a different day. I have my issues with Anakin's turning, but I think Dooku's turning with much less time makes a lot more sense to me as to what was going on there. And so I did a video on how to fix the Phantom Menace a few years back, and I never was able to actually complete it. I had this whole other thing I was going to do. My thoughts actually for what I was going to do for motivation for Anakin's turn is actually a lot like what this did with Dooku. Of Anakin sees actual corruption. Mine was going to tie into the slavery that the Republic allows slavery, and he was a slave, and then they form a clone war or clone army, and the Jedi are okay with forming sentient beings for the purpose of being cannon fodder, and Anakin as a slave sees that, and he makes friends with them and watches them die, and just more of them are produced to die. You realize, wait, this group that I'm fighting for, they're actually kind of corrupt. This is really evil and gross. But now I'm ranting about my own Star Wars alternative universes of what I would do. Let me know your ranking of the Tales of the Jedi. I really enjoyed this series. I think only episode, the training one with Ahsoka was the only one that I was like, okay. Other than the twist, that's not great. All the other ones I thought was just a pretty cool little series, especially the Dooku stuff. Share your ranking down below. Check out my other Star Wars stuff here. Keep talking.